Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Uh, I'm so sorry. I'm really struggling with the gear and everything here. I can't get everything to work every time. It's just anyhow, sorry about being late. Technical difficulties as always. I try to get started, like I've been trying for the last half hour to try to get this thing working. But let me know if you can see and hear me okay. If the brightness is okay. It looks okay to me. And what else is going on? Um, I kind of picked a topic this morning, talk about, have things really improved in photography. I guess, I was it kind of has a negative connotation to it, right? And I really didn't want to be negative today because I love photography. I have a great passion for it, and I want to encourage everyone to get into photography. And, one of the things that, for many years, my channel was all about showing you how to use your camera so that it would not be a barrier, right? That, uh, getting through the menus and, even today, I still get a lot of feedback on the videos saying, thank you for making these. I could never figure out the camera, but your tutorial. So, as an instructor, teacher, uh, I guess when you connect, it works. It works out well when you connect with the teacher and you understand them and anyhow, but and that's great. But it got me thinking about you know all these years. I've been shooting since 2013, so I guess 11 years now. Gosh, time flies. And when I started basically with the Sony NEX6, which is a APS-C 16 megapixel, uh, compact interchangeable lens camera. Not too dissimilar from the A6100, which is sort of its immediate successor, in my opinion, because it doesn't really offer anything more than what my NEX6 did, other than it's 24 megapixels now. And you know, it. Sorry, I'm a little bit disorientated here because of all the technical issues I've been having. But I think so. It got me thinking. Well, okay, so we're working with roughly the same kind of camera after 11 years, potentially, if we're looking at Sony, but really almost any camera brand. Uh, the major improvements have been, I think, when we're talking about gear, the major improvements have really been with the autofocus, image stabilization. Pretty much everybody is mirrorless now, and there have been some improvements in dynamic range and noise levels. Most of that is academic, though, in my opinion. Digital cameras are generally, we've been around between I guess between 9 and 12 stops of actual real dynamic range. And and ultimately, when you go out to a dynamic scene like a sunrise, sunset, anything backlit, these scenes are way over, 12 bits of dynamic range, and you have to either, you know, pick your battles, right? Do you want to save the highlights or do you want to keep noise out of the shadows? Otherwise, you have to bracket or use graduated NDs, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the things, so dynamic range is better, but it's not like night and day, right? We're still, as photographers, have to uh, use a technique to capture it or pick our battles, so to speak. When it comes to ISO and noise performance, there has been some nice improvements there. I think we can shoot at like ISO 25,000 now, which is not too dissimilar than, say, ISO 1600 from 11 years ago. But it's not, most of us aren't trying to shoot at like ISO 25,000, 50,000. Most of us are shooting pretty much in that range between, 100 and 6400. When we go higher than that, it's usually for very specific things like sports, action photography, where you have to keep your shutter speeds up, or you're using a slower lens, at 5.6, f8. Uh, so even I would argue ISO noise performance has not really changed that dramatically or improved our photography in our gear, because we're shooting pretty much in the lower ISOs anyway. I mean, there was a question about ISO tolerance. Everyone has sort of a different level. I don't have any really limits on ISO. It just depends on the scene. If it's a very high dynamic range scene, I try to keep the ISOs low, and then I might bracket. Or if it's relatively flat, cloudy day, I can go much higher ISO. Uh, or if it's if I can get close enough to the subject and fill the frame, which is generally, I've noticed that's been kind of my style. If you look at my Instagram and Flickr pages, you notice I tend to crop in pretty tightly to the subject, uh, or fill the subject with as much of the frame as possible, occasionally leaving some context for the environment. But uh, yeah, I don't have really a tolerance for ISO, right? And with the noise reduction software out there now, it really has raised our tolerances much higher, what we can do in camera versus what we can fix in post-processing. And so there's that. Uh, Other improvements have been sort of like in the camera itself, the software, the computing side of it, the AI, whatever you want to call it. We have a lot of features built in the camera now that, just didn't exist, 20, 30 years ago, right? We can we can do like in our Olympus cameras, obviously we can do live comp, we can do high res shot modes, and all different kinds of bracketing, ISO bracketing, white balance bracketing, art filter bracketing, whatever. There's so many different ways to bracket in our cameras. And these things are getting piled on more and more and more, especially in smartphones, where they do a lot of computational photography, which is basically their exposure bracketing or exposure stacking. There's no secret sauce really to smartphones AI or uh, computational photography. When you have a small sensor like that you would find in a cell phone, and you have to take more pictures and stack them. Now, the technology has allowed these cameras, smartphones, to do that very quickly, and there is some AI algorithms to improve the image in camera or in the phone, and as well as in our cameras as well. So I'd say the computational side has been helpful, uh, and some improvement, but it ultimately is not the end all be all solution, right? Uh, nothing is uh, better than having a very good foundation in your photography skill set, understanding exposure, right, and what your sensor is capable of. And I watched the video yesterday from our friend Emily at Micro Four Nerds about taking good pictures with bad cameras. And basically, I think at the end she said, a good picture has nothing to do with everything we talk about when we talk about gear, right? It's about capturing the happy times in our life, or the let me rephrase that: the memorable times in our life. at least from her perspective, right? Others look at it as documenting things in times that we live in, and and we can go on to every genre. But I would say there are no bad cameras, only bad photographers, right? And by bad, I just mean they don't have the skill set to capture an image uh, that has meaning for the moment, or they're unable to capture the scene in front of them the way they want to. Uh, so basically, they don't understand exposure. Maybe they don't quite grasp composition. Some people do this naturally. They can go out naturally and capture images that tell a great story or have great composition. They just have an eye for it, right? And then there's other people like me that just have to study, other examples, copy people and try to find my own style and try to understand what are people seeing that made this a great image. So when we're talking about gear, I think photography hasn't really changed, right, in terms of gear. I could pick up a 10, 15, 20-year-old camera, uh, and get the image that I want, uh, and not and take a brand new camera and get the same image, right? There's there's very little difference. Like I went on a photo job yesterday where I had a couple of properties that I had to do, and I just used my OM1 camera, Micro Four Thirds, which a lot of when you look at a lot of real estate, I'm not really in real estate photography, but it's very, very similar, right? I'm doing interiors, I'm doing exteriors, but I'm doing commercial properties. And a lot of these guys say go full frame, right? Because you want to capture that dynamic range, you want to, for whatever reason, a lot of people are pushing the full frame camera. Uh, and I guess, because I shot with a full frame camera, the Nikon D750, back early when I was starting in this particular field. And when I was switched to Micro Four Thirds, it made no difference in the quality that I delivered to my clients. In fact, it was the most of the benefits to switching to Micro Four Thirds are mostly for me and my workflow in doing that kind of photography. And finally, the other manufacturers have caught up to what Olympus can do in terms of that workflow. But the workflow on Olympus and OM system cameras, I think, are still much better suited to photography than, say, other cameras. And don't ask me to name it off the top of my head. I can't, but I can tell you that it's very easy for me to set up the camera and get it to do the kind of images that I need to do and the quality that I need to deliver. And when I go out and do my normal photography in the field, photo walks with the photo club, etc., same thing. The way that the camera operates, the workflow in the camera is, I think, much more intuitive or much more photography centric. And that's the other key improvement, and this is not photography, is in video specs. Like the Canon R5 Mark II came out, and really the key advantage to that over the Mark I is just in the video specs. I think on the photography side, there's not much difference. I think a little faster frame rate, maybe, frames per second, I should say. So it's, the electronics are faster, but for the most part, uh, you know, how many people are really going to shoot 8K with a consumer grade camera, right? No, not that many. Most people buying that camera are not going to be shooting in 8K and delivering for a client. If you have a client and you need 8K, you're going to buy whatever that other thing is, the C80 or you're going to buy something else. And most clients don't need 8K. I can't imagine because most delivery for video is on 1080p or 4K at the most, and that's not that common even today. So this it's just like when the OM1 Mark II came out. I didn't feel any need to upgrade. Yeah, it's a little better, and a lot of people did upgrade, and they appreciate the improvements that the OM1 Mark II brought. But it didn't grab me enough that I felt like, there's a $2,000 gap, right? By the time I trade in and all of that. Uh, so I don't think basically I don't, and I'm not being negative, but I don't think things have really changed that much in digital photography. And Emily's recent video kind of reflected that as well, that you can still get great pictures with old cameras. So certainly there's professional work that can use and appreciate some of the features, like in event photography. The autofocus is a big deal. But it cracks me up when I watch these videos where people are trying to see, did my camera focus on the eyelash or did it focus on the iris of the eye? I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, I mean, are you cropping into the eye so that you can get an image of the iris, or are you taking a picture of the person's face or body or whatever? Right? You're not. I just, I just, uh, I just laugh when I see that because I'm like, are you shooting at such a shallow depth of field that this little half a centimeter, 5 millimeters maybe difference between the tip of an eyelash and the eye iris is going to be out of focus? Uh, And I get it. It's some people are really into gear and they want that. They just want it. It's okay. If that's what you want, then yeah, that might be very important to you. But I would argue it has nothing to do with photography, right? And capturing images and things like that. So that's kind of my general thought on have to the question I posted. Have things really improved? Uh, I think that was the title, something to that effect, and I don't think so. I don't think things have changed that much. We can get lenses from 10 years ago are still good today, right? Um, can they resolve the new 45, 60 megapixel sensors? Not necessarily. Many of them cannot, but does it is there really that much difference? Like I was comparing uh this lens This lens is at least 10 years old, right? This 24 to 85 on my DF, and it's a 16 megapixel sensor. But when I take pictures of Ellie with this camera, and I nail focus, because autofocus is a significant improvement actually, but when I can get her in the frame and focus, it's perfect. It's it's just amazing, and I couldn't ask for a better image from a camera, any camera, right? Even when I take out my A7R5, which is I don't know where it is. Eh, when I post the pictures and look at them, I'm just not seeing that much difference. And if anything, I'm seeing differences in color science and things like that, which are easily corrected, at least now for me, right? Hmm. So I'm just not impressed. I appreciate the differences in the camera and I like playing with a lot of different kinds of cameras. But I took out my old Panasonic LX5, which is a little tiny CCD sensor, like most smartphones now have a bigger sensor than what's in that LX5. And I got some amazing images out of it, uh, in terms of, resolution, clarity, dynamic range. Everything is perfect for the kind of images I was taking. And when I run into a scene that's a little bit out of the range of that sensor, I can bracket. I can take multiple shots and blend them together in software. So So the editing side is probably where we've seen the biggest improvement in our photography, not in the gear. It's mostly in the editing. So that's why I love, you know, I use DxO Photo Lab. The kind of quality I can pull out of old cameras from that software is amazing. Uh, and all of the tools for color and grading make it very easy to uh, get anything I want out of any camera. So in that sense, there has been big improvements. That's where I think the most improvement has been is on the software side, on our PC, in the editing. Uh, so anyway, let me know what you think. Uh, if somebody handed you a camera from 10 years ago, uh, compared to what you're shooting with now, maybe you're still shooting with a 10-year-old camera, but most of it's probably upgraded since then. Have you really seen a big improvement from camera A to camera B, this 10-year-old camera versus your modern camera, uh, for most of the photography that you would be doing, right? I'm not talking about specialized professional work where, yeah, some things are a big deal, but I think for most of us, any camera will do, right? So anyway, let me catch up on the chat. See who's here again. I'm sorry I started so late. I see Roger's here. Good morning. Anthony has I don't have a way to show the comments on the screen right now. Uh because I couldn't go through my other app that can allows me. But anyway, I'll just read it out loud. So Anthony says OM system needs to drastically do something to earn the trust back of the Micro Four Third user that they're going to be around for the next 10 years, or more by introducing an all-new camera with all-new tech. Okay. Well, uh, new new tech, yeah. I mean, it certainly would be beneficial. Uh, I would say I think if they're just releasing cameras that are incrementally better every year, I'd be fine with that across the range. They need to expand their range. And then because remember, cameras used to be 3 to 5 years between releases, right? In the last, you know, I don't know, 20, 30 years or whatever. Film cameras go on for 10 years or more sometimes, right? Uh, but it can be about 3 years. It only feels like the release, like Sony is a good example. It only feels like they're releasing new cameras every year because they have such a wide range. They're releasing like one new camera, uh, and at some level every year, right? If not multiple versions of the same camera every year. And I would argue even Sony is still using the same old 24 megapixel sensor that they had back with the Sony NEX7, which is going on 10 years now. Sony NEX7 was a 24 megapixel APS-C sensor. Is the sensor they use now really that much different than the one they had back then? There's certainly a layer of autofocusing on top of that sensor, but there's not much difference. There really is not that much difference. It's so yeah, they just released the Sony A6700. Still has terrible rolling shutter. The readout speed is slow, just like the old Sony NEX7 from 10 years ago. But what are they doing? They mostly the tech is on the software side with the autofocusing, right? On the Sony. They also added image stabilization in camera, which Olympus started, I believe, but whoever started it, uh, image stabilization. So it's got a couple of little things. Excuse me. But I could take a Sony NEX7 and take the same image as I would with an A6700 because they're both 24 megapixel APS-C sensors. Slap the same lens on there. So I think more than anything, Olympus just needs to expand their lineup across different ranges. We need an OM10 desperately, desperately. I disagreed with David on this initially. David Crooks, I see David was here. I'll get to your comment here soon. But I'm kind of with him now on that. We need like a $500 or $600 camera that has all of the modern tech, that Olympus has to offer, OM systems, phase detect, etc. So I would add that I would expand on Anthony's statement. They need to expand their range first, and then we'll see the new tech come out with each camera, you know. And he also says they need to bring out Pen F replacement that is weather sealed. An all new camera does not need to be exactly the same as the original Pen F. It does not need an optical viewfinder. Okay. Yeah, optical viewfinders is I don't see a need for it anymore. But a weather sealed Pen F, definitely. A lot of people, and this is another area where I've changed my opinion, is uh, weather sealing is a big deal for so many people. Uh, I just don't happen to live in an area that the weather is inclement so often that I need a weather sealed camera. And if it is getting cloudy or rainy, I don't even go out. So it's a combination of mostly fair weather, dry weather, and also my aversion to going out when it's raining anyway. But I get it. I get it. A weather sealed camera in general is always nice to have. Uh, well, he goes on and he says in 2025, they need to introduce all new OM2 with a minimum 28 megapixels with all new image processor. And this camera needs to be a real wow camera. I I don't know about the megapixels. Uh, they'd really have to jump to almost 40 megapixels. Uh, and I say that because people are looking for 8K video for whatever reason, right? The camera is just going to get knocked by all the influencers and YouTubers uh, for not having 8K video. And to achieve that, you need a 40 megapixel sensor. Going to 28 megapixels does not add any value to the video side. Okay. On the photo side, yeah, it'd be nice to get a little more resolution and also have while maintaining the dynamic range and ISO performance that we have at 20, but I don't think it's going to influence the buyer as much as say this camera can do 8K video, even if only for 5 minutes before it overheats, right? Like the R5 Mark II, whatever its limit is. Um, so jumping from 20 to 28, which probably can be done, uh, why would they if it's not going to improve the video specs? If anything, it would hurt the video specs and drive up the cost because you have to have the hardware to support uh, pushing 28 megapixel images down to 4K and having the fast readout speed and all of that. Because if you go to 28 megapixels and then your rolling shutter gets worse, again, people are going to complain. So, yeah, I would love a photocentric camera. I wouldn't miss video very much, if at all, 99% of the time. But if they're going to sell a camera, they can't sell it with crippled video specs in this day and age. There's just too many influencers or people looking to buy cameras that can do video. And I think that's why Panasonic came out with the S9 is it's basically a video camera. It's barely a photography camera, if you ask me. It's just a video camera. Um, because there's no mechanical shutter. How can it be a real camera without a mechanical shutter? Aside from going full on global shutter, right? So Yeah, I don't disagree. It'd be nice to get higher resolution, but I think it's going to be at a cost that would cripple the sales of the camera on the video side. Okay, and then good morning toward this side towards screen and Walter. Hey, Walter, how are you? I'm going to see you next week. Um, and let's see. Well, Walter's a good friend of mine here locally, and we go out time to time. Um, Darko says, "Good morning, Rob. Love the live stream pick. It reminds me of Columbo, the show. Yeah, it is. It's sort of my Columbo imitation. I try to pick a thumbnail that's relevant to the topic, but not always. It's hard sometimes." And Darko says, "What has improved? Well, with the Nikon, the autofocus in the Z6 III, I tried third 3D tracking at the Nikon event. Yes, let's just say sticky is like glue. Yeah, I mean certainly on the sports action side." Uh, Capturing, okay, that is a very significant improvement for sports action type people, right? I mean, getting a bird in flight used to be really hard, right? That's moving fast. Take like a frickin' tree swallow. I mean, there's no frickin' way in my lifetime would I ever get a picture of a tree swallow sharp in focus without the technology we have in autofocus today. There's just no way. And if you're talking about larger water birds like the blue herons and egrets, uh, yeah, that wasn't super easy either, right? With the kind of the older autofocusing systems. And now, yeah, no problem at all. Anybody can get a good shot of a water bird, right? The larger ones. Uh, we just when I see a sharp picture of a bird now, I'm not as impressed with the technique anymore. Like it used to be, I'd look at an image and I'd be like, "How did they do that?" Right? Like a bird in flight image. And now I know it's just the autofocus in the camera and the frames per second that camera can do. These things, yes, certainly have improved for that kind of photography, but I'm not impressed anymore by those images for the technical side because I know the camera's doing all the work. All the photographer did was push the button, and that's such a mean thing to say, but uh, you know, there's certainly very magical images still out there where photography is first, right? They captured the environment, they captured the lighting, they they spent, days, weeks, if not months to capture one image of a bird in flight in a particular scenario. All of that still goes in, on the photography side, and they would miss the shot if, with were it not for the technology that we have in the cameras now. But we're talking about probably 0.1% of 1% of 1% of photographers that do that kind of photography, right? Where they go out days and months over years and years in multiple locations and try, to get that one image that is amazing and would not have been possible to get that perfect shot were not for the autofocusing technology. And let's see. So yeah, the Z6 III 3D tracking, I'm sure it's great. I want to test the new firmware. I haven't updated mine yet. The new firmware and the tracking on the OM1. Supposedly that's been improved. Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out. Uh, and this side towards screen says, I just saw some film point of view walk with the Nikon Z6 III. Think he was using a gimbal, but the video looked fantastic and it was at night. Oh yeah, I'm sure. But people have been getting great video at night since like the GH4, right? It's all about technique, that skill set, lighting, composition. Um, I did some video work yesterday of the property, and I made so many mistakes. I made so many mistakes on the first one. The second property I went to, I did a lot better, but, either I was at the wrong aperture, I didn't focus properly, I didn't get the angle of view, I had the wrong focal length. I mean, I mean, I'll make something deliverable for the client, they're gonna like it, but I was really disappointed with my first set of video that I did at the first property. Then when I got to the second property, I got really good video. The first 5 minutes of video was terrible, and I was like, "Okay," I had to reset, right? I said, "I cannot do the video again like I did on the first property." So I had to reset, and, uh and then I got good footage for the next 10 or 15 minutes that I was recording. Oh, Marcia, good day from Southeast Florida. I'm so envious. It's starting to get cold here. This is probably the last really warm day we're gonna have here, like in the 80s, and we may not see that again for a while, at least not for like the whole week has been in the 80-degree range this week. It's been amazing. Uh, but now we're gonna get into the 70s pretty consistently, which is okay. Then we're gonna be in the 60s in no time, and, like, by November, I'm gonna be, coat and hat with gloves, hand warmers. And Jeff Painter, good to see you. David Tellett, good morning. Yeah, it is cloudy this morning, isn't it? Here in Maryland, Virginia, DC metro area. And Darko says, "In the city, somehow we never have our own cameras on display at our photographic dealers, nor do we have any reps come out to build the brand." Um, yeah, when you only have 2 cameras, uh, maybe 3 if you count the TG5. They probably have more TG5s on the shelf than anything else. And let's see. Does anyone still shoot Pentax? Darko's asking. I don't any. I have a Pentax camera. I always want to get back into it, but I gotta stop buying cameras and just shoot with the ones I want and get the lenses that I've been kind of wanting for a while. Uh, and he says, liked my Pentax film cams, and I had point and shoots as well as the K30, which was two great picks, and second IBIS cam. My first cam with IBIS was the A100 Sony. Wow, old DSLR days. And this side towards screen says, I'm a Pentaxian. Yeah, there's a lot of Pentaxians here. Uh, I got a bug to get a Pentax like K70 or something. It's faded now. I'm okay. Don't get me started on looking at Pentax now. I got my Nikon DF. If I'm gonna shoot a DSLR, this is what I'm gonna shoot with. I got the lens for this. I'm so happy with this lens, this 24 to 85. It's basically a kit lens, but it's so good. Uh, and Roger's asking, Rob, can one do panoramic stitching of shots using Photolab 7? Not in Photolab 7. There is a stitching software out there that's free. I forget the name of it, but I'll do a video on panoramas again. Using there's two different stitching softwares that are pretty good. So when you can supplement Photolab 7 with third-party software, either free or very cheaply, like focus stacking, um, panoramas, HDR. HDR is still a little rough, but there is one that I tried that was pretty decent. But you can get free software that will supplement Photolab 7 for the features that it doesn't have that you find like in Photoshop, right? So if you don't have like a professional workflow like I'm doing with the jobs I did yesterday, I would happily use these third-party software, but because I have to deliver, usually 24 to 48 hours, I need a very fast workflow, and Photoshop workflow is just second to none, in my opinion. With working with multiple images and layering and stacking and all of that HDR. John Langston says, "Good morning. What time does the 10:15 stream start?" Starts around 10:30. Just count on it. Uh, and Linda Marks, good to see you. Yes, I am fashionably late. And Marco's here. Hey, Marco, always good to see you. And Linda says, "This will be a very first world chat." I thought, and Linda says, "I thought he was playing a detective in that photo, Trench coat Columbo, just one more." Yeah, that's a thing. And Weird Stream started like it was Eric Lindquist. Good to see you. It says, Weird, the live stream started like it was already playing minutes ago. Shrug, not an exact science, I guess. Yeah, I, I don't know why I struggle. Hopefully the audio video is good today because I'm streaming directly through YouTube rather than going through my software. And Ron says, "I've been shooting for 53 years. Wow, that's awesome." David Crook says, "The Canon R5 II now has Pro Capture." Yeah, a lot of camera companies are starting to do that. And Wayne Cox says, "Computational features and AI are interesting." Yes. Mirrorless and Darko says, "Mirrorless is great. My first mirrorless camera was a Lumix GF1." Wow, that's the very first Micro Four Thirds camera, isn't it? And Linda Mark says, "My newest cam is recently the G85 from 2016. Haven't really tested it yet." It's a great camera. I had it for a little while and traded it. Not because I didn't like it. I just wasn't using it because I have a Pen F, right? And when I had the two side by side, I just took the Pen F, so I traded it and I think I traded it. I don't know. I traded it for something. Uh, Probably for another camera I hardly use. But I remember the G85 was extremely well made. That is one thing Lumix has never veered off from, is making really well made, at least in terms of how they feel in the hand, really well made cameras. They feel durable, rugged. They're just a little too utilitarian, in my opinion. But that doesn't show in your picture, so what difference does it make what the camera looks like, right? And Darko says, "Took the D500 out yesterday, and it being cloudy, I shot ISO set to 200 to 4000 and got some good shots." Yep, the D500 is an excellent camera. And Darko says, "I still like the range of base ISO to 2000 on most of my current cams." And let's see. George has said, "Did you add ads?" No, I don't add them. I turn them on. So I guess that's like adding them. Uh, but I set it to low or balance, something, I don't know. There's I just leave it at default. By default, they're on, the ads, but I don't add them specifically. And Eric says, "Been using mirrorless for 12 to 13 years and still don't know what I'm doing. I'm a slow learner. I know what app, ISO, and shutter speed is, though." Impressive, right? Yep. When I started mirrorless, I had no idea what aperture was. Or when I started photography, I should say. And Linda says, "Is it just me or did he just freeze?" I'm really good at sitting still. I was thinking about adding a fan or something moving in the background so you guys don't think I froze. It comes from practicing all these self-portraits, right? Something like that. I feel, and Darko says, "Our Lasse, good to see you, Lasse." And Angela, "Play for one. Improvements have been made in autofocus, subject recognition, and high frame rate shooting. The wildlife shooter enjoys does improvements that really help them. For portraits, nothing has changed." Yep. That about sums it up, right? Is the speed of the camera's operation, but not so much the image quality itself. which is kind of what I was focusing on, so to speak. But yeah, Angela Play for one is definitely there's been real improvements there for the sports action people. And Darko says, I feel out my camera's extremes, low light, highlight, to know what its capabilities are and also what features I like to use often in the device. Yep. And Marco says, I agree with almost everything you're saying, Rob, but with an added wrinkle, the gear has to inspire you to want to use it. Some folks are inspired by all cameras, but some are inspired by specific gear. Yeah, I mean, this hobby in general, you know, w- where do you get your inspiration to go out and take a picture, right? Specifically, what's your inspiration to use a camera in general? And those of us that love gear and love fine craftsmanship, right? Uh, Sometimes the camera itself can inspire you to go out, right? The pen app, I just love my pen app because it's such a fine piece of equipment. It's no different than everything. I always like to use like wristwatches as an analogy, right? Uh, I could just get a $10 Timex, right? Tells the time just the same, and they come in a lot of different styles, but I like mechanical watches like this one. This is a Seiko 5. I don't know if it's gonna focus on that or not, but, there's a little you can see in there. So by now, this is a very dated, mechanism in here, but it's a known quantity, and you have to deal with the quirks, right? I have to set the time every couple of days, uh, because it didn't rewind. It's, it doesn't I didn't it didn't the winding ran out. It's an auto winding type watch, right? Uh, I much prefer this kind of watch over a quartz watch, which is, virtually perfect in terms of keeping time, much more accurate. But I wear this because this has a certain level of craftsmanship to it, right? And lineage and history. There's certainly some sentimental value in it for me because my dad always wore Seikos for the most part. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation, I guess. Talking about the craftsmanship that goes into designing a camera. There's certainly it's very, very technical now, right? Because everything's electronic. But there was time when mechanical cameras, film cameras, there's just some that are just designed beautifully. They didn't, and people would buy them and use them just for the mechanical expertise or mechanical beauty of the design, right? I'm saying, God, I'm so bad at articulating today. I need to read more or something. um, Having used the Olympus EM1 Mark I, agree with Rob without regards to workflow for still photographers. Yep. And this side towards screen says, I thought I wanted a well-balanced hybrid camera. Now I just want great photos. Video can be shot on a dedicated device. True. Linda Marks, let's see, that's a response. And this side towards screen says, some of my favorite images came from cameras that are nearly over 10 years old. Yep. And my chat just jumped again. Sorry, I'm going to try and scroll up and catch up. Film cameras. Okay, here we are. And Darko says, I think AF for birders is greatest improvement. I saw Rob's bird AF lesson for EM5 Mark II. I got the hang of it for birds and birds in flight. Yep. Speaking of devices from 10 years ago, so I don't even remember, stuck battery sag of my GX7 got unstuck. Oh, good, Linda. That's good to hear. Linda's battery got stuck in the camera because it's swole, I assume. That's awesome. You ended up sending it in to get it done, though, right? And Linda Mark says, animal eye detection for my dog, plus L monochrome D is really the only new thing I would like to have. Um, I think I think you can use a regular monochrome profile and adjust the contrast and get pretty much the same thing, and then underexpose by third of a stop, and you have L monochrome D. Let's see. So on the Panasonics, I think you can also adjust highlight shadows, right? If you just tweak those a little bit, you can get pretty much an L monochrome D profile. And Rob, with your gas, you have the unique opportunity to see the nuances between camera models. Yes, I try anyway. That's my excuse for buying gear anyway. It's like it's a camera, but it's a little different. Yeah, the images look pretty much the same, but this camera's just a little different. See? It's very subtle, right? It's how I justify my gas. And Linda, I mean, I'm just let's see. Linda says, I mean, I'm just a lowly JPEG shooter with no standards. I can hand you my LX3 from 2008, which to be fair is very slow, yes. The LX3, beautiful camera though, beautifully made. It's not too different from my LX5. And it just they did such a good job with the LX series. And that's why I have the LX 100 Mark II now. It's just an amazing, amazing camera. I could probably do 99% of my photography with that LX 100 Mark II. Uh, Almost even my professional work, to be honest. The only problem is it's not quite wide enough. It only goes to 24 millimeters. I've been buying older cameras, MFT and Canon. I have a GX1 in the mail from Japan. Oh, nice. Nice. Did you buy the one? I was looking at one on eBay and somebody bought it, but it was like brand new in the box, virtually brand new in the box. GX1 with a 14 to 42 power zoom lens, mint condition, 299. And somebody bought it. I bet that was you. You bought it, didn't you? Because it had, you have to be careful when you buy cameras from Japan because some of them are Japanese language only, and they're tricky, if not impossible, to convert to English. Uh, And Linda says, operational speed is an improvement I appreciate, as now I have a leash with my dog. On the other hand, yes, so I need to be quicker. Yep, I do that a lot. I go out with Ellie and take photos. And yeah, it's nice to be able to turn on fit, it focuses where you want it to. It doesn't have to be animal detect, just focus on a point quickly would be enough. And then when you be ready to take the next picture or sequence of pictures. But my problem is I find when I'm really when I really want to go out and take good pictures, I can spend hours in one location, right? And 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 just walk away with just a half a dozen images that are semi-decent and maybe only take 40 or 50 images total over several hours. Uh, and that's why people say film slows you down, right? Because nothing's slower than having to crank the freaking thing every time you take a picture, right? Unless you got a newer film, which auto advances, uh, but manually focusing, winding the shutter, it slows you down quite a bit. And I discovered that, many years ago, going from digital back to film, how much it slowed me down. And that's translated to my digital photography where I just don't go out and spray and pray. I want to capture one image and do a good job with that one image. And Darko says, I occasionally buy old tech cam. I find the ISO range is the only thing I find the difference is if you go 10 megapixels and up. I'm not seeing a huge difference at base ISO uh, or lower ISOs. Yeah, certainly when you go higher, particularly with CCD sensors, they kind of lose it when you go to high ISO. I would think Eric says, I would think there's a big difference in ease of use between my EM1 Mark 1 versus my OM1. Resolution is the same, but like high res, bracketing stabilization has improved, almost a must now. I don't know. I don't think it's really necessary, right? It's nice to have it in camera, but you can do all of that in post-processing, for the most part. If you want a high-res shot, just take multiple shots, and just frame in a little tighter, then go around. Y Yeah, you can pretty much duplicate all of this. Bracketing, of course, is done. Stabilization can't be duplicated. That is a significant improvement. That said, the GF7 from 2014 are pretty snappy already, depending on the lens. Yep. And Linda Mark says, I'd be sorely tempted by an OM10. Yeah, I would definitely wait. The M10 Mark IV is a little bit long in the tooth now for an entry-level camera at its price point, because you can get a Canon R50 for like $700 with a lens. The Canon R50 has everything, right? 4K, subject detect, great autofocus, etc. At a very low price point. Articulating screen, mic jack. So this is what omsystem has to compete with, right? Is something like a Canon R50 at $699. It's like how you can't come in with the OM10 is going to have to beat it in many ways. Uh, and Angelo says film cameras were mechanical and needed complete new tooling to change on the production equipment. But now, for the most part, of camera electronics is software engineering. A lot of it is within a very small window, but hardware improves significantly every few years, right? I forget the name of that. They used to do it in computer. Marco would know. There's a certain term for every so many years the performance of the computer doubles, right? On the hardware side. Uh, TL says Taylor Swift need to use an Olympus pen. Oh, I gotta watch that video from Jimmy about Taylor Swift. Uh, Not a huge fan of Taylor Swift. I like a couple of her songs, but uh, I like the colors of John Allen says I like the colors of JPEG full frame versus MFT cameras. Yeah, JPEG science, color science is another thing that one person had mentioned in the comments section on one of my videos that PenF is not going to sell unless they include sort of some vintage film simulations right into the camera. And they already have several actually with the art filters, right? Vintage 1, 2, and 3 uh, just come to mind. Then the grainy filters 1 and 2. Um, so there's 5 right there, and then you have pale light and color. That's another one. There's 6. So the art filters on the Olympus cameras are pretty much film simulations, right? Cross processing. So Fuji has the distinct advantage of being able to use their own brand of films from the past and put them into their cameras. Olympus and OM Systems would not have that advantage in terms of branding. Uh, they'd have to call it something else. They'd have to call it Vintage 1, Vintage 2, and that's what they did in the art filters. And then the Pen F, with its configurability, being able to configure saturation uh, of individual colors and also having tinting ability with the color wheel, you can make a recipe for different film simulations. But Again, I think a lot of this is done in can be done in post-processing pretty easily, but if you wanna do it in camera, the art filters are pretty much film simulations. You just can't call it like Fuji Relia or Fuji, Pro Negative. System just didn't have any film that I know of. And Linda Mark says the low price is important, but look at Taylor Swift. She could afford 10 medium format cameras or Leicas, but prefers a tiny EM10 Mark IV. Yep. Uh, Don at large, I believe the paradigm for stills tech today is complete. Only subtle difference is tweaking by camera makers. Seems video tech paradigm keeps shifting. Love MFT and also enjoy the niche S1R. Yeah, I I I want the S1R so bad because it's sort of a combination of technical engineering and image quality and the color science that I got out of it. Certainly, a lot of my cameras outperform it with respect to autofocus, uh, but it's good enough. And you got me gassing for an S1R again. I thought I got it out of my system for one day. Now I'm gassing for it again. Anyway, uh, Darko says to be controversial on medium format cam at Fuji prices. Oh wow, they'll never do that. And Angelo Play for One asks, "Does OM Digital Solution have some R&D department left?" As far as I know, they have it. It's probably half what it was when it was under Olympus, but as far as I know, they do have a lot of the same people from Olympus. And Wayne Cox says, "I have a GX9, nice camera." Yeah, it is very nice. I'd love to have a GX9. I'd like to get a really nice Micro Four Thirds camera from Panasonic. I don't want the G9 Mark II, but I'm leaning the original G9 or GX9. The original G9 is a lot cheaper than the GX9 because of its size, but it's the better camera of the two, but it's so much bigger. But I'm kind of leaning. I still want a G9. I don't know why. I still want one, but a GX9 I think would suit me better, just because I like the rangefinder style and the more compactness. And Ron Murray says the entire global digital camera market is only 7 billion a year. Demanding a new camera system every 2 years is not going to happen. Explore OM2 and its capabilities first. That is that is what we should do, right? We should all like exhaust the capabilities of a camera before we buy another one, and certainly exhaust our capabilities as a photographer, right? Expand our skill set before we buy another camera. So, but that's just not going to happen. Consumerism companies have to make money, and they do that by releasing cameras. And then the market of Angela says the market of cameras is 6 million bodies a year. OM sells only 100,000 bodies a year. Even Sony is not releasing new bodies every year. And Wayne Cox says, I think there needs to be an innovation small form factor camera. OM2's niche is wildlife. Yeah, the OM1 Mark II. I'm looking for an updated small rangefinder style body with an EVF. Weatherproof would be awesome. Yeah, we're talking again, we're going back to uh, Pen Mark II with weather sealing or GX9. Does the GX9 have weather sealing? I think it does to some extent. And the OM5 Mark II would be nice. Yeah, OM5 Mark II is nice. And Rod says, "Hey Rod, how are you?" Sounds like someone's in need of a checklist. Oh, I think you're referring to my video fiasco yesterday. I'm still pissed because it doubles my production time to crank out a video. The video for the first property is gonna take me twice as long to crank out the video that I did at the second property because I screwed up. And it's mostly in the editing, right? Like, I can use this clip, but not this clip. I can use that clip, but not this one. In the second half of my in the second job that I went to, I can just throw the whole video into the clip and just make cuts here or there, rearrange a little bit, and spit it out. But the other one, I'm gonna have to God, I'm kinda dreading doing the video. I might it's gonna take too long, and it's gonna my eat into how much I'm getting paid per hour. If you look at it on an hourly basis, I try not to get below 100 bucks an hour, but it's gonna eat into that easily. Uh, ugh. And of Science and Superstition says, "Hi Rob, love your channel and your brutal honesty. This is a rarity in YouTube now." I guess. I mean, I think most of my peers in the Micro Four Thirds community are pretty honest. They I think the key difference is that um I don't have any filter, right? It's like I if I love something and I'm biased, I tell you I love this and I'm biased, you know. If I don't like something, doesn't matter. I'll tell you I don't like it. Uh Marco says my first band slash concert shoot, I was so nervous but pushed through. Editing took 2 weeks. Yeah, I bet. I bet. Yeah, when I started out doing these photo jobs, before I had like a solid workflow, yeah, it took a long time to edit, you know, because I would capture images using different techniques and that technique had to evolve. Uh, but yeah, the photo editing side, I'll probably finish. Like I captured 300 images, but it's really only about 100 because I bracket, right? So it's 3 shots per scene, and those either get HDR, particularly like exterior shots. Mostly just HDR because there's not mixed lighting there. Interior shots, I do layering and exposure blending. But I have a workflow down now. I can probably finish those 100 shots in about an hour, and then I end up delivering maybe 15 to 20 images out of that 100 that I edit. Uh, the reason being is because I'm working in a lot of mixed lighting. God, this place yesterday was just awful. They had blue LED lighting, warm tungsten lighting, and then natural sunlight all coming into the same space on shiny red objects. And red is tough. I still struggle with red on my camera. Anything that's red in the frame gets too bright, right? It doesn't matter what camera I'm using. They get too bright or they turn kind of pastelly. And then I had to mix flash on top of that. And I was using umbrellas, which I rarely do, but I was using umbrellas this time because the property I was shooting had so many layers and levels that I couldn't just simply bounce light off the ceiling, which is what I normally do. I had to bounce light from an umbrella in different directions, so off the ceiling and then forward with an umbrella to minimize the frickin' shadows. Uh, Otherwise, it would just cut your eyes out with all the angles of sharp shadows in the scene. It was a pain in the ass. I mean, it didn't take me any longer than any other normal photo shoot that I do. But the first property I spent about an hour shooting and about another 20 minutes of video. And then the second property I was done in 45 minutes, video and photos. Uh, because I got into a zone and then I was able to just kind of, get through it quickly, and I did a better job on the second property in half the time. I don't know why I was so out of whack on that first property. I mean, most of the photos are okay, but this and I'd show them to you, but uh, I'm under an NDA for all the photography for various reasons. I can't show it. Uh, but yeah, I didn't do a great job on the first property. The images I'll deliver will probably be fine, but the the first property, the workflow is gonna be so God, got me thinking about it. Anyhow, uh, and Darko says, "You want gas, Rob, pick up the ZF Nikon. You want gas, Rob, pick up and try the ZF Nikon, but I did not like how it handles to the Z6 III. Oddly, the ZF appealed to me when it first came out. I had a little gas for it, but it faded very quickly. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm not connecting with how that camera looks and feels. It may change later. I don't know. You know how I am. But I I just didn't I was gassing for it for a little while, but now not at all. I'd much rather have the S1R. I don't know why I'm not gassing for it. I think because it reminds me of the ZFC, which I didn't like either. I mean, they're really nice looking cameras. They have that very vintage Nikon DSLR look to it, but somehow I'm just not connecting with it. I don't know why. It's kind of odd. And hello, Jose. Good to see you. Jose from Puerto Rico. Whoops. Damn chat window jumped again. But I'm almost caught up, I think. I'm on less than 30 minutes behind now. Very cool you had that G85. Yeah, it was a great camera. I wish I still had it because it's like tripled in price since I bought it. I paid $200. It was virtually mint in the box. 200 bucks for the G85 with the 12 to 32 lens. Uh, this is many years ago. 200 bucks. Now what do they want? They want 500 bucks for the camera alone. It's crazy. And Linda also says, I take back the first world comment, was expecting something different. Oh, I missed that. And Jan is here. Hello from Denmark. Next week will be 20 Celsius, cold nights. 20 is not too bad. Um, what is 20 Celsius? Isn't that like in the 60s? Yeah, 68 degrees. I mean, that's not bad for an evening. You just put on a light jacket, right? But yeah, I don't my problem is the anticipation of the very cold days we're gonna get in the winter. When it starts to cool off, when it gets hot, I'm like, "Okay, we're still in the hot weather. It's gonna last," you know? But, man. And then of science and superstition says, do M43 have any camera with film camera dials, shutter dials, and ISO similar to Fujifilm? Yes, the LX100 Mark II has the aperture dial on the lens. It's a fixed lens camera. It's not interchangeable though. But it has the aperture ring on the lens. It has the shutter speed dial on the top and exposure compensation dial. ISO, however, is set in the menu. So you click a button and roll the dial to change the ISO. But yeah, aperture and shutter speed, definitely. Trying to think if there's any interchangeable ones though. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if anybody knows, let me, leave it in the chat section. Uh, But yeah, this where is it? Oh, here. Okay. So here's the LX100, right? So you have the shutter mode dial, exposure compensation, and then the aperture ring right here. And then for ISO, you just kind of click up and roll the dial. Or what do? You click up and turn the dial. So it's kind of an dial, but this is the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Okay. And all of the LX series cameras, I believe, are like that, but they're all fixed lens. An outsider says 40 megapixels is also good for birders. Yes. And then tell it, yeah, the LX100 has shutter and aperture dials. Thank you, David. uh, and Darko says, I fell in the Nikon ecosystem and find that most new Z cams, the button layout stays consistent. Yep. And the menus, right? For the most part, they have that same kind of look and feel. And Jose D. Leon says, have you checked the latest update for the OM1 camera as well as um, the rest of the system? Anything new we should know about? I haven't tried it. I saw one video. I think Jeff Painter emailed it to me. No, it was Roger. Roger emailed me a video where the guy said it's better, particularly in video, but he didn't really do a before and after, right? Like, I could go out and have an amazing day with birding and everything's in focus, and other days I go out and I'm like, I'm missing everything and stuff is out of focus. Uh, so it's important if you're going to test and say the autofocus is improved in a definitive way, you should have a consistent methodology to comparing before and after. So I'm trying to think of because right now the autofocus is fine for me. I'm not like a hardcore birder anyway. I really enjoy it and love getting sharp shots, and it does that for the most part. But for me to be able to say it's improved, I don't want to just go out and say, yeah, it feels better. You feel that? Yeah, yeah. I think I'm getting more shots in focus. And how would I know? I can't go out and say I consistently go out and get 95% of my shots in focus. I can't say that because it varies so much, right? Some days it's like that, some days it's not. Uh, but if I was at a level, maybe that person's at a level where they know they go out, they get things in focus all the time, a certain percentage of the time. And when they upgraded the firmware, that percentage went up. So I don't want to discount what he's saying, but from my point of view, I don't see how you can just kind of touchy-feely a firmware update and say autofocus is improved. I'd like to be a little bit more definitive. And certainly the way I shoot, I have to be more definitive. I can't just if I came out and told you guys, yeah, the autofocus is better, don't believe that. If I just went out and updated the firmware and shot with it. I mean, who am I to say it's improved? Because my photography wasn't that great to begin with, right? I could just be having a good day. And JS says, hi, Rob. Just quickly dropping in. Usually watch your streams after the fact. Your love for the S1R is part of the reason why I now have a gorgeous S1 and I'm absolutely loving it. Thanks. Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. It's really a very fine piece of equipment, isn't it? The build quality and ooh, sorry, I got a text or an alert on my phone. Anyway, um it's like I don't need I probably have about as many watches as I do cameras. But I like to wear the ones that have something to it, something, right? And Linda says, I went to the camera store. You got the battery out. Yes, it was ever so slightly swollen. Good. And Linda says, don't think sending it in would have been worth it. A new used cam would have been cheaper. I know, right? Don't they have some minimum flat rate they charge for anything you send in? It's like 2 or $300. It's crazy. And Eric says, off topic, going to cost around $500 to get my dad's old Pentax K1000 fully restored as new for sentimental reasons. I'll do it. I know, right? I have uh I have a amplifier from the 1980s, a Pioneer that has a lot of sentimental value to me and you know, what is it, 50 years old or 40 years old now, the caps have all exploded, have dried out and it doesn't work anymore. And it would cost me probably a couple $100, which isn't bad for a repair in general these days. It's kind of ridiculous. Caps are like 50 cents, but uh yeah, they quoted me $160 to replace the caps and assuming that was all that was wrong with it. They always find more and then your bill is like 200, $300. But I want to get that amp fixed. I could buy a much better amp for like $100, right? But it doesn't have the same sentimental value. And Linda says, interesting to see so many Pentaxians. My first digital cam was a K100D. Wow. And this tie towards screen says, my first DSLR is the Pentax K10D. Used it for nearly 14 years, then I upgraded. Wow. You ain't kidding around, man. You would be the death of the camera industry if people only upgraded every 14 years. Um, with all the vintage lens and Pentax lens, I stayed in the ecosystem. Yeah, it makes sense. Lenses are amazing. You know, uh, who was it? Yeah, it was in Emily's video I just watched. Now lean into the imperfections of the lens, you know. And Darko says, speaking about slowing down, I visit the same spots and look for different imagery to capture other than what I already have. Also, the time of day you go matters, especially in street. Yeah. Yeah, different times of day, places can look completely different. And Linda Mark says, I'm Googling the LX100 too, find them quite expensive still, even the Mark One, and if you get dust on the sensor. So I'm not having any dust issues. The Mark II supposedly improved on that. Uh, so and there is a video out there of a guy cleaning the dust off the sensor. What he did was is he put a giant hose on the front of this and turned the vacuum on to suck the dust out. So I assume you have to do that with some regularity over time because you know how it is. If dust gets on the sensor and stays there, it's basically glued there now. So you don't want to let anything settle inside the camera for too long. And George says today is the first time I'm seeing YouTube ads during your live stream. Maybe the difference is because I'm streaming directly through YouTube rather than using my software. And Jan says ads also here. First time on my TV, on PC all the time. Yeah, I get ads all the time too, but I question if I should leave them on or off sometimes because it's like a stream like this, right? And I have what 60 people here, give or take. I'm gonna make like $1 or $2 on the stream. That's it. Uh, so it's like, do I make the $1 or $2 or do I just turn them off so everybody has a better experience, right? So I know a lot of times the ads are off. And the problem is when I specifically turn the ads off on my end, YouTube still puts them in. And I'm like, well, if they're going to put the ads in anyway, I might as well get credit for it. So that's why I've been turning them on now more often than not, is because the ads still come in, whether I turn them off or not. And I just said, well, you know, save a dollar, earn a dollar, earn a dollar. If I can earn a dollar or two off the stream, I will. Wayne Cox, Moore's law. That's it. Moore's law about computers doubling in speed every 10 years or whatever that math was. Wayne Cox says Moore's law is I did not buy the GX1. I got a nice one for $159 shipped, no lens. Oh, okay. That's a good deal though. I love the GX1 because it's basically like my LX5, but it has uh or my LX100, but it's an interchangeable lens camera, right? And Marco says YouTube sometimes bugs out regarding the number of in-video ads. I got a couple too early, but it seems to have calmed down. And Alex says you're right about others not being able to use labeled film simulations. Would you say fighting out how to get the average consumer into post-processing could be a game changer? Would you say figuring out how to get the average consumer into post-processing would be a well, we'll see with the Lumix S9 and the when Lumix updates the rest of their lineup with the firmware where you can do in-camera LUTs, right? Which are basically creating your own film simulations. And others are going to create film simulations and they're going to have to be distributed for free, right, through the Panasonic ecosystem. So we'll see. I hope that takes off. I think it's really very interesting feature to be able to do your own LUTs because LUTs gives you full control over the color grading. Hue, tint, saturation, uh, luminance, basically everything, right? Uh, so we'll see. We'll see. If you were to ask me, I don't think it would, mostly because people like it in camera. I hope that the being able to do the LUTs in camera like the Panasonics will make it better, but I think you have to use the app to do it. But you can load the LUTs onto the camera. So that's a nice I think that would be a really awesome ecosystem. We'll see. I'm gonna wait a little bit. Well, I not that it's available really now. I don't want the S9. So I'm waiting for Panasonic to release a camera that might interest me a little more that has that capability. Uh, so yeah. And Marco says SR1 2 likely coming out in the next few months. Perfect opportunity to trade the A7 or 5. I know an S1R Mark II will probably be smaller, just like the Leica SL3 is a little bit smaller. And then I can get into the Lmount system because the Lmount glass is second to none. I really believe that. I mean, it's made by Panasonic, which makes all the amazing micro four thirty lenses for Panasonic, right? And they did a just as good, if not better job with the L mount. And Alex M says ease of use for the average consumer paired with vintage labeling is probably what gets most buyers, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the film simulations and Fuji. I don't see the big deal, but I do a lot of post processing, so it doesn't appeal to me quite as much. If I was more of a JPEG shooter, I probably enjoy it. Like when I first started with the Pen F and the EM10 Mark II, I loved the art filters. I just love them to death. Now I rarely use them because I do everything in post processing now. But I was a big fan of them when I started out. And Linda Mark says Ali and Pana should just buy the rights to Kodak, Ilford, or Agfa for their film simulations. Yeah, that would be pricey though, right? Uh, there's got to be a way to name something without naming it, right? I mean, you can't make it so similar that you get sued for copyright infringement, but it's got to be a way. And Linda Mark says, Rob always fuels gas for me. I know, sorry. But I don't know. I just love buying stuff. I added a bunch of stuff to my store this morning. Uh, robtrek.com/deals. Mostly filters and things, but I'm always shopping for deals. It's kind of tempered my gas for cameras a little bit because it got me thinking, if I got this filter, I got this lens, I don't really, you know, money would be much better spent on a filter and lens than buying another camera body. And Marcos says, JIPOM system retain ownership of all Olympus manufacturing and R&D. Most of the marketing team's still around too. Look at how many videos come out in so many languages. Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. And there's obviously been some churn, but we're almost 4 years in. Don't believe all the FUD and don't spread the BS. It just hurts the company. Yes. And Linda Mark says the G85 does have weather sealing. Of course, I have no idea if that my camera is still good. Camera has about 1,000 shutter counts, so it might be quite new. Maybe I should get weather sealed lens. If you shoot in inclement weather, yeah, get a weather sealed lens. And my chat just jumped again. Why? Okay, I'm only 20 minutes behind now. So if I talk faster, Marcus says, I'm not saying it's only you, but it's FUD. I don't know what FUD stands for. Uh, there's been hardware and software advances in the last couple of years, new lenses, all while it missed a difficult transition to rebrand the product. And David says, I agree with Marco. And Linda says, oh, wow, you got it cheap. Mine was 270 euros at MPB. Looks pristine. Shutter count, 10,000 or 1,000. Sorry. My eyes are not that great either. Most of the letters on the screen here are like kind of doubled on me. Uh, Linda says, I think they meant minus 20 Celsius. Oh, minus 20 Celsius. That would be cold. How can it be minus 20? My God. Anthony was probably is minus 20 where he lives. And Darko says, I saw an XT3 for 1,200 used. I paid 950 new when the XT4 launched. Yeah, they are freaking nuts. They're freaking insane, these used camera prices. That XT, I had the XT30. Didn't care for the camera. I like the XT50 though, but didn't care for the XT30 at all. Uh, why is that camera not selling for like $400 or less? It doesn't make any. It takes some great pictures. I got some really great pictures with that. With the 35 millimeter f2, XT30 takes amazing images, and it has all the film simulations and stuff. But that is a $400 camera, in my opinion. Maybe 500 tops. Because you can buy brand new Canon R50 for 700 with the lens, right? Uh, Linda Mark says, a friend of mine has the Nikon Z50 and it seems to be quite good. What I haven't seen in any system so far is like the Ollie 45 millimeter, very good, tiny lightweight, 90 millimeter equivalent. Yes. The Z50 is awesome, according to Darko. I have one and call it my baby D500. I know, right? It's a great little camera. I mean, Nikon makes really, and the colors coming out of my DF and all of my Nikons, I've always loved the color science out of them. Uh, and the Great Benzini, good to see you. Good morning. And Angelo Play for one. Oh, that's for Marco. And the Great Benzini, same with guitar amps. You have to get them recapped. Yes. Way back when I was talking about my stereo amp. and have to quit here. Have all the good rest. Okay, Leslie, we'll see you later. Thanks for coming in. And Darko says, my father's Konica S2 film rangefinder was refurbished, CLA'd, which is what, clean, lube, and something I can't remember. Anyway, it's been basically refurbished. Uh, $140, but I did not care. I paid it because I wanted to have it operational, even if it was only worth 40 bucks. Yeah, I know, right? That it goes back to what, sometimes things in our lives have more value than they are to anyone else, right? Like I have a Minolta S1 SRT 101. It's my dad's camera. I'm there, that's worth $1 million to me. I'll sell it for 1 million, but not much less. Uh, Everything has a price, right? But if somebody offered me like $1,000 for it, I'd be like, no, because the camera's worth what? Maybe 100 bucks, if that. We'd have to get up to we'd have to get up into five figures before I start thinking about selling that camera. Certainly six figures would do it. So I'll take any offers six figures and higher right now. I will sell my Minolta SRT 101 if anyone's interested. I still use my Panasonic G1 that I got in 2008. It says now thinking about getting the Olympus EM1 Mark II. Wow. Wow. So this is from Juha. Uh, so does that mean you've been using only the G1 all this time and now you're thinking about upgrading to the EM1 Mark II? That's pretty impressive. And Jen says ads is okay. And Linda Mark says, by the way, the K100DS was already very old when I got it. Still, if it had been even lighter, I might still have it. Lovely camera, yes. And the Great Vanzini says, no ads for 15 bucks a month. Best thing yet. Yeah, I don't mind the ads. I'm just tired of paying these subscription fees everywhere. I'd like to go back to just everybody has ads and no subscription fees. Uh, I mean, it's like death by a thousand cuts, right? I mean, I'm paying the higher fee on Netflix, so I don't get any ads, but that's because if I gotta pay anyway, because they have a you can pay less and get some ads in your subscription in your videos. If I'm gonna pay anyway, I'll just pay a little extra and get no ads. But yeah, I hate it. I hate all these little subscription fees. Uh, and Darko says, I wish the S9 had an EVF. Yeah, a lot of people do, right? And the chat just jumped again. Why? This is really annoying. And Angela Playful One says, seem you like the Lmount. What do you like about this system? Uh, I the lenses, primarily, I think the lenses, I mean, they're not small, okay? But the image quality I got from the lenses was so impressive to me. I I I can't quite put my finger on it. Like if I can't tell you it's the micro contrast or the colors. All I can tell you is that when I had my S5, when I had my S1R, I did have one for a little while. Uh, the images that I got from those two cameras just I thought were incredible. When I put a third party lens on it, the images were not incredible. So they did something really, really right with their lenses. And I can tell you that's all I can tell you is that I just when I put the S lenses, the 50 1.8, the 85 1.8, the 35 1.8, when you put these lenses on that camera system, be prepared for some of the finest image quality you've ever seen in your life. I just loved the lenses, and that's what I like about it. And I can't wait to get back into the system. I'm just waiting to find a really good deal on an S1R. I missed one last week. I've missed two really good deals where I could have got it for around 1,000 to $1,100, right in that range, for one in good condition, like reasonable shutter counts, if not almost none. They had shutter counts around 16 and 18,000, which is not much for a camera like that. I wish I'd bought it now. I mean, $1,000 is not going to save me. Like if I had an emergency right now, $1,000 is not going to save me. So why not get an S1R? That's you know what I mean? Ah, 'cause I don't think I'll be able to really afford the S1R Mark II when it comes out, and it's going to come out because they're going to ask $3,000, $4,000 for that camera. It's going to be like A7R5 price, right? Closer to 4,000.
Someone was detected at your porch.
Mm, okay. Jan says, if you talk faster, I can't keep up. I know, right? Marco has explained what FUD means. Fear, FUD, right? The acronym. Fear, uncertainty, doubt. Industry term. Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking of another F word, but that makes more sense. Uh, and this side towards screen says, Rob, did you see the Pixie digital rangefinder camera? It has upgradable sensors. Yeah, I've seen that. Interesting camera. A little pricey though for what it is. And the other problem is you have to use L-mount glass, I believe. Not L-mount, I'm sorry, M-mount lenses with it, right? And all of those are really expensive. There's third-party stuff, certainly, but even the third-party ones, the 50 millimeter, like 0.95 is $700. There's 35 millimeters from these other companies that are like $1,600. It's like, oh my God, lenses are so expensive on the L mount. I will get there one day. Hopefully, in my lifetime, I will have a M mount camera and some decent M mount glass, right? One day. Like Zeiss makes a lot of good M mount lenses that aren't too expensive, but I'm just not there yet. When I look at when I look at all the M mount cameras, there's Leica and there's a Pixie and there's some older cameras like the what is it called? The Epson, right? RD1 is interesting. 6 megapixel digital CCD camera with an L mount. And I think there's a couple others in there. I'd have to go back and watch Mattias Burling's videos again. But I'd have to go with the Leica if I'm going to get an M mount camera. And which Leica I get, I think the 240 is supposedly really interesting. Uh, but then I don't know. They're just so expensive for what they are. And I can get virtually the same satisfaction from an L mount system as I would an M mount. Because I can buy L mount glass made for Leica for my Panasonic. So yeah, and then have autofocus too, right? So that's why I'm leaning more L-mount first, and then maybe in 5 or 10 years, I'll eventually be able to afford an M-mount. And let's see, Gordon says, almost bought a used S5 II and 12 to 60 lens for a great price, under 1,000. Wow. Used the robtrek technique of pulling in the cart and waiting a few days. Fortunately, it's sold. I didn't really need a full frame. I know, right? I do that so many times. It'll just sit in my cart, and then when I go back, it'll say this item is gone. And the Great Vanzini says the XT20, XE3, X83, X100T, and A XT100 Bayer sensor one. Here, I rarely use them. I didn't. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I see where you're going with that. I'm surprised you don't use the XE3 much. The XA3, that's a piece of crap. Sorry. It's a cheap Bayer sensor Fujifilm. My God. Why would Fuji make such a thing? I mean, it looks nice. It's a nice looking plastic piece of crap. I shouldn't say that. No cameras are crap. There's no bad cameras, only bad photographers. I I shouldn't say that, but XA3 I'm surprised. I think that's a nice, really nice camera. And Wayne Cox says the 90 macro is currently living on my OM1, shooting in the garden. G9 has the 40 to 150 Pro or 75 300 on it for shooting critters around the yard. Very nice. Yeah, the 90 macro one day. But I need to go out and just want to shoot macro, and I just don't have that urge. Um, and then great. Oh, CLE means clean, lubed, and adjusted. Right, because uh, especially the mechanical shutters and the focusing mechanism, if it's a rangefinder, they have to be tweaked sometimes, right? So that's the adjustments that they make. They check the shutter speed for accuracy and the if it's a rangefinder, the the accuracy of the focusing there. And Linda says, boring gas question. Which SD card for the G85? Uh, oh, that's easy. A Samsung. This one. I just bought this for $25. I think it's selling for like $30 now. Samsung Pro Plus. It's a and it has a single row of pins, so it's a UHS-1 card. It's a great card. I have the older version of this that I've been using for many, many years. But when this went on sale for $25, and this is why I do my shopping streams, because I got so many good deals. I had to share them with you guys. $25 for a 256 card in this at this level. This is a this quality, I should say. This is such a good card. And they come in smaller varieties, right? Just get the 256. $25. You can get the 128 for like $20 when it's on sale. It's about $5 more when it's not on sale. But either way, whether you pay 25 or $30, uh, those are my go-to cards. And Linda says, I almost bought a G2 because it was blue. I know, right? Wouldn't make sense for me. And the Great Vancini says the XA3, it's okay, but not great at all. Yeah, that's a nicer way to say it than I did. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it was crap. Then Mark says, upgradable sensor sounds like the Ricoh GXR. Boy, did I just lust after the APS-C 50mm module. Oh, that's right. Had a lovely rendering. Yeah. I don't know, the whole idea of the interchangeable, making a camera modular, I don't think it's gonna make is it it makes sense because technology changes so quickly. Think about it. It reminds me of when they tried to make laptops modular, right? Where you could swap out processor, you could swap out hard drive, memory, whatever. Basically, a modular laptop. And to this day, I don't think anything like that it's popular, if they exist at all at this point. Cameras are kind of in the same boat, being such a technical device now. It's hard to change one part without almost mandatory to change the other part with it. Um, so that's why they can't just simply drop in a new sensor into a camera because they'd have to update everything else around it. When I'm talking about like omsystems and Panasonic, these modular cameras that are designed to swap sensors and things, it's an interesting idea, but it just sounds like a very expensive proposition when it would be cheap. If you could just make the camera a little cheaper to start with, and then when you want to upgrade, you buy another one. And David says, I see they dropped the price. Oh yeah, that kit, S1R to 17.99. I know. I just don't need that lens. I mean, I could buy the camera and sell the lens, I guess, but then I'll end up paying more for the camera body ultimately because I'm not going to get enough money because the lens is worth about $700, right? S1R plus a 24 to 105 f4. It's about a $700 lens in good condition, if not close to mint. And so that would make the camera $1,100. And the camera doesn't have any, it's basically brand new in the box, 600 count on the shutter, right? That makes it a really good deal. But the problem is, for me to sell it for $700, unless I go on to Fred Miranda or something, I'm going to pay 10 or 15% fees on eBay. And if I trade it in, I'm only going to get like 300 bucks for it. So uh, I end up paying too much for the body. And if I keep the lens, I'm not that excited about it. It's an f4 zoom lens. Sure, it's versatile. Take it with you, and pretty much that'd be all you need. But I have my everyday camera. I don't need an S1R to be my everyday camera, right? I'm gonna take my S1R out and I'm gonna slap a prime on there and go do what I do with that prime. I'm not gonna take the S1R, not know or have a very specific idea of what I'm gonna shoot, which is what zoom lenses are great for. If you're not sure what you're gonna be shooting, it's kind of a random photo walk or something. Zoom lenses are terrific. I love zoom lenses for that. But that's more of an everyday camera type scenario for me. Uh, when I don't know what I'm going to shoot that day, just something randomly comes up, catches my eye, or I'm in a certain mood for doing certain types of photography. Zoom lenses are great because I don't have to like say, "Oh, I wish I brought this other lens." But the S1R is not going to be a camera like that for me. The S1R is going to be like, yeah, I'm going to go out with the 28 millimeter, the 35, the 50, the 85. I'm going to take out a specific lens and I'm going to do something with that camera. So that's why if anyone's wondering why am I so adverse to that lens, it's not because it's not a great lens. It's just kind of a big heavy lens for with a which doesn't offer me, it's just not a lens I would use at f4. I'd rather have a fast prime like a 1.8 when I go out. I mean, that's more than 2 stops difference, right? That's a huge difference, and primes are generally a little sharper, but it'd be hard to tell the difference with that lens. It's such a good lens, but I'm not going out with that. And Big J says, or I'm sorry, uh, is China taking over markets for camera manufacturers from the current ones? I don't know, be honest. I mean, I know they manufacture a lot of cameras for other people, but I don't know if they have their own brands other than those cheap piece of craps that sell for like $100 that nobody should ever buy. But uh, yeah, I don't think so. And what do you think about Samsung cameras? NX300, NX30, NX500? They're nice. They don't appeal to me. Uh, I think technically they were very good and outperformed many of the cameras in the market when they came out, and they continue to be very good cameras to this day. Uh, but they don't appeal to me. There's no lenses for them. You know what I mean? Mainly because there's no lenses for them. If they, sorry, I'm getting some arthritis in my hips, so I have to put my leg up if I've been sitting too long. So yeah, yeah, no interest in Samsung. There's just because you would buy the camera and use it with whatever lens you could get for it, and that would be it. Um, and that may be fine if you can get them cheap. So let me put it this way: if you just want an everyday camera with a kit lens on it, and you can get a Samsung cheap, you could do worse, right? But like I said, when you can get, uh, I don't know, what are they selling for? I have no idea. Samsung. So an NX100 is $145. Wow, that's cheap. What is that? A 14 megapixel sensor, interchangeable lens. Uh, okay, no EVF, no tiltable screen, and it has normal kit lens. And it looks like APS-C size. Can't tell. Yeah, it's an APS-C sensor. 15 it's okay. So why is this $145? Condition. Camera 20 to 50 lens, battery, and charger. Interesting. But that would be it, right? If you just want to point and shoot, why not? I don't see anything wrong with it. What was the other thing you wanted to know? Samsung NX. How about a 500? $450 with a 16 to 50 kit lens. Again, no EVF, so that's a problem. That would be a problem for me. Uh, Samsung NX 3 300, $400. Oh, this is a 2000, 300. So that might be the other reason it didn't appeal to me is I don't see any with an EVF. So it seems like they're cheap enough. If you just want to use it as is, I would get that NX, that first one we looked at, the NX100 with a kit lens for $145 and just go out and shoot and enjoy it for $145. Um, but I wouldn't spend $400 or $500. No way, not for a Samsung. unless you really like the styling of it, if there's some if there's some subjective reason you like the styling of it, yeah, go for it, pay whatever you want. But if it's just from a technical standpoint, I don't see any reason to spend more than if you can get it for less than $200, a Samsung, that seems fine. Uh, but for me personally, because there's no EVF, there's no way to upgrade the lenses or buy lenses for it, it would just never appeal to me, even as an everyday camera, because I already have so many. And Wayne says there's a macro photography exercise where you sit in a 10 by 10 foot area for an hour, similar tour to go to one area and shoot only there to help slow down. Yeah, I've seen people do that. Uh, I think I don't think I could do that. The exercise in of itself makes sense, right? Because you always find things that you would not see otherwise unless you spend some time in that one spot. But I would just get bored so quick. I don't know. Uh, and Linda says, thanks for the SD card tip, Rob. Unfortunately, sales from your shopping streams don't apply here in Europe. True, true. And I don't have a feel for good deals in euros, unfortunately. And Wayne says, I've resisted buying the G1 so far, although I think they can be found for under $100. I think so too, and that's the thing. I would get like an older Micro Four Thirds camera because I know I can get all different kinds of lenses for it. But as an everyday kind of putz around, go play around kind of camera. But a Samsung, like I said, because there's no lenses for it, it just wouldn't interest me long term. And this side towards green says, Rob, if you were buying used, what a shutter count would you consider good or bad? I'd like to be well under 20,000, under 10,000 even better. Uh, because most cameras have a shutter life of like 100,000, right? Some claim 400,000. Doesn't matter what they claim. Ultimately, it's the condition of the camera. And when the shutter counts are low on the camera, that means they didn't really take it out much, right? Or use it much. So less opportunity to drop it and have other environmental issues, right? Like rain, things like that getting into it. So I like to look at the overall condition of the camera. Some cameras are uh, used like in event photography a lot. They're going to get beat up a lot. Some cameras are used for product photography. They're just sitting on a tripod 99% of the time. So when you look at a camera, you'll be able to tell if it's got a bunch of scuffs and nicks on it, but the shutter count is not that high. That means, the person didn't care about the camera, didn't take care of it. They let their kid use it, whatever. So I look at the overall condition of the camera and then I look at the shutter count. So if the camera looks minty, like hardly used, then I look at the shutter count. And if the shutter count is on the higher end, closer to 20,000, I'm thinking, no, they probably use it for product photography or something like that, indoors a lot. But it's just a guessing game, honestly. You always take a risk. And Jan says, dinner time. We'll try to listen in the kitchen. Oh, okay. Making me hungry. It's almost lunchtime for me. And Linda says, yes, always raw and mostly. Wait, I missed somebody's comment. And Juha says, Sony Panasonic 15 millimeter f1.7, not 1.4. I guess that's part of that previous comment. I don't really know where you're going. And Darko says, I've been intrigued by Nikon J system. They are really cool little cameras. Uh, but for the price that they're asking for them these days, I I don't know. Again, there's not a whole lot of lenses for it either, right? So if you want to expand that system at all, so I'd rather have like a Panasonic GX1 than a Nikon J system because they're about the same size, and Micro Four Thirds, of course, you can go crazy. And if I recall, the autofocus wasn't great on those cameras, but I think you like Nikon anyway, so why not? If you like Nikon, you like the styling, you don't mind the couple of lenses that you can get for it. Um, just get it. I mean, I look at them time to time myself because they are kind of cool looking. I like the black with the silver, but I just never pulled the trigger on one or search for them because there's just no lenses for it. And Wayne says, making breakfast, my son in California. And Darko says there is a Nikon F to J adapters were probably painful and inaccurate. Yeah, I wouldn't bother with that. I mean, you can taking a 1-inch sensor and adapting a full frame lens, or even an APS-C lens with autofocus. Yeah, that's a train wreck waiting to happen. And Darko says, seen my friend's D3 hit 1.2 million, died shortly after, but he beat his camera to death. Yeah. And this side towards screen says 5 years ago, NX Minis were new in the box with a kit lens for $200. Not anymore. Ooh, what's an NX Mini? I wonder. Looks like you can't be talking about cell phones. Samsung, maybe this? Mm, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not that familiar with the Samsung line. Oh, NX. What did I type in? Let's try that again. NX Mini. So 150, 220. It's not too bad. 360, 380. So these are probably more realistic, right? Look at that font. Looks a little bit like my cell phone font. Wow. So it's a fixed lens camera or not? No, it's not. Try again. Samsung NX Mini. So it is an interchangeable lens camera. Wow, 275, 360. These are interesting. But yeah, no freaking way am I paying that much for it. NX lens. See what lenses they have. There's a 60 macro, 20 to 50, 16 to 50, a 22.8, 18 to 55. Yeah, that's really about it. there's just no lenses for it. What is this? The 50 to 200? Um, yeah, it's not much going on there, right? And Linda Marks says, I've looked into Nikon 1 and NX Mini 2, but I think I used NX RX 100 would be make more sense. I would even say a ZV-1 uh, makes more sense because those can be had for like 400 or 500 bucks, and those are terrific little cameras. They don't have as many controls, but you get used to working with the dial and you just shoot in aperture priority, even program mode with a camera like that, right? Um, I've thought about the ZV-1 myself. I still think about it time to time because I need to replace my this guy. Let's see if this is working. Yeah, it's working, but I need to replace this camera there because the sensor's starting to flake out on it. Right, Ellie? Ellie's down there. Want to see her? Let's see. Where is she? There. Hey, baby. How's my girl? How are you? Yeah, my baby girl. Yes, you are. Okay. Anyhow, uh, that camera, that other camera's getting really flaky, although it's working good today. But some days it just freaks out like this. Um, you know, just it's just not reliable. If I don't touch it, it seems to be okay, but as soon as I touch it, it just freaks out. Oh, so cute. Love your dog. Yeah. I love my girl dog. Um, oh, she left. Where are you going? Are you hungry? Oh, she comes back instantly when I say that. You are hungry, aren't you? You want a treat? She, she's so funny. This morning, I was eating two eggs and a avocado, and avocados are poisonous to dogs. So I normally when I'm just eating the eggs, like there'll be some of the I like them runny, so there'll be some of the egg left on the plate, and I'll give that to her to lick. Right? She likes to lick my plates. And but this time I had avocado on the plate, so I didn't want to let her lick the plate at all. And it's- so she's like following me as I get up to walk and put the plate into the sink. And as I'm walking into the kitchen and I put the plate in the sink and I start running the water, she like stomped the floor. She's like, "Damn it." She cracked me up. It's like it pissed her off that I didn't let her lick the plate. I mean, I was just rinsing the water, and then suddenly I heard this like bomb on the floor like this. Like she just stomped her foot. She was mad. But anyhow, Rob's Fine Dining and Camera Shop love it, right? Yeah, avocado and eggs are a really good combination. If you could do your eggs over easy or sunny side up, and you mix those together with a basically a mushy avocado, and you cook all that together, put a little garlic and uh, um, a little bit of garlic and black pepper and a pinch of salt. Oh, so good. Um, and it's so healthy for you, right? A small avocado. If you got a medium or large size, cut it in half. But you get a small avocado with two eggs, lots of protein, lots of essential oils and vitamins, and it's like the perfect breakfast. Um, and it's so healthy for you. Okay. So I've been jibber jabbering for a couple hours. If nobody has any questions, I'll leave it open for another minute for questions and things and wrap it up with eh, yeah, things I don't think cameras have really improved our photography in of themselves, right? Aside from the sports action stuff that we talked about with the autofocusing. But yeah, the most significant upgrades have been autofocus, image stabilization, and higher resolution. I think dynamic range and ISO performance have not been dramatic. We still have to bracket shots most of the time to capture all the dynamic range that we want. Uh, and Camera sizes are still not that much difference. I mean, when I look at my old Olympus E400, E500, those are small and great little cameras, but the autofocus is weak. So that's where we've seen really the improvement. But for point and shoot stuff, like someone else summed up earlier, yeah, portraits, point and shoot landscapes, cameras really haven't changed that much. But for the bird photographer, they have. Um, Linda asks, or Big J says, I just bought the Samsung NX30 with viewfinder. Almost new for 80 euros, like the image. Oh, nice. Wow. Yeah, for 80 bucks, man. That's what, maybe $100 US. It's fine, right? I mean, I just, man, I've paid more for a tank of gas in a car wash. I remember when gas got up to like almost $5 a gallon here. I think it's still that in Europe, right? Because you guys got taxes and stuff built in. But uh, my God, it was like I walked out of there. It was $100 to fill up my tank and get a car wash. So, friend, that was years ago. Linda asks, does your dog sleep in your bed? Uh, kind of. I have her bed. I have a queen size bed, and I have her bed on top of my bed. So she sleeps in her own bed, but that bed is on my bed. So we don't actually sleep, together, right? Like on the same bed. She has her own bed, and I sleep on mine. So we don't bother each other. Rob, I'm surprised you don't have your own camera shop. Win the lotto and retire on that. That would be nice. And then monitors have HDP. I don't know what that is, but let me look. B&H is currently offering, oh, HDR. Okay. HDR. Okay. So, uh, yeah, I don't know where that came. That just kind of came out of nowhere. But HDR is basically the monitor is able to display higher dynamic range. But typically, those monitors have to be very, very bright. So the monitors where you see like they have like 400 nits, that ain't gonna cut it. In terms of brightness, you need to be at least 1,000 nits on a monitor to get decent, at least have the ability to display an HDR image in all its glory. So a lot of these, the 600, the HDR, I forget what it's called. There's like a 400, a 600, 1,000. There may be more. Uh, but the 400 to 600, there's not much difference in the image quality you'll see on your monitor if you want to display HDR content. You really have to get up to a very high-end, very bright monitor to get decent HDR. Same goes for televisions, right? They have to be very, very bright so that you can display very bright scene without losing detail and then maintain the blacks where they need to be. If you only have 600 nits or 400 nits to work with, you're not going to get that dynamic range in the scene. So, yeah, just definitely when you're looking at HDR monitors, don't believe the hype at 400 or 600. You have to get at least 1,000, and whatever that spec is called, I don't know exactly. Um, I can see use camera shop for Mr. Trick. Yeah, and let's see, gas is around $5 in California at the moment. Wow. Yeah, I paid nine $3.09 yesterday for a gallon. And that was a little high for me. Most places were actually 3.15 or 3.20 per gallon, so 3.09 is not bad. But I found a place, but I didn't have enough gas to get there. But I found a place for like 2.99 per gallon. And Roger says $2.80 in Massachusetts for gas yesterday. Oh, BJ's is cheap though, man. $2.80. It's crazy. And Finland's gas price about €7 a gallon. So that would be, yeah, that would be closer to $9 in the US. Uh, Linda Mark says, no judgment, Rob. It's perfectly normal. Okay. I forget what we were talking about. Uh, Henry Rester says, what is the practical difference, if any, between using aperture priority and an exposure dial versus, okay, I understand, exposure compensation versus using manual to keep the aperture constant and adjusting the shutter speed? All right. So it depends what you want to do with your photography, right? Right? What kind of image? Aperture, you select the aperture for a very specific intent, right? You pick lower apertures for low light so you can keep your shutter speeds up. Or you want a shallower depth of field, so there's creative purposes for it. So the pragmatic reason might be is you need to keep your shutter speed up because you're in low light. A creative reason might be is you want a shallower depth of field or you want a deeper depth of field like when you're doing landscapes. So choosing your aperture, you're going to be very specific. And then you combine that with the exposure compensation dial is for like when you're in backlighting situations. So you have a very bright background or a very dark foreground, whatever, and you need to raise the exposure. And by raising the exposure, what it does two things, right? And it depends on your settings. And when you raise exposure compensation, I should say, is it's either going to raise the ISO if you're using auto ISO, and or it's going to lower the shutter speed. So when you're in aperture priority and using exposure compensation, you have to be very conscious of the shutter speed and ISO. Because if you're doing a landscape and you're on a tripod, you can fix your ISO to the base ISO, and the shutter speed can go as slow as you want. You don't have to worry about camera shake, right? Um, if you're doing, uh, let's see, if you're doing low light photography, then typically you're going to be handheld. You're doing street photography on low light or portraits on low light, whatever. Then your shutter speed might drop too low, or your ISO is going to be too high, and you're going to get either a blurry image or you're going to get a very messy image because of the high ISO noise. Uh, so exposure compensation, dialing that in plus or minus, is kind of a separate thing from the general conversation about why would you shoot an aperture priority to begin with? Because you're going to have to pay attention to your shutter speed and ISO. Now, when you're shooting in full manual and you say manual versus using manual and keep the aperture constant and adjusting shutter speed. So basically, you're shooting in manual, you're fixing the aperture at whatever you want it to be, and you're just adjusting the shutter speed. Uh, again, the reason so basically you're shooting in a shutter priority mode type situation. But you didn't mention, Henry, if you're locking the ISO or not. If you have the ISO fixed at ISO 100, And all you're doing, so you fix the ISO and you fix the aperture, so you're just adjusting the shutter speed. So faster shutter speeds will give you darker images, slower shutter speeds will give you brighter images. So that's effectively like doing exposure compensation, right? But that's under the assumption that uh, the light is that you're starting at a base exposure and you want to make it brighter or darker, right? And whatever that base exposure is, for example, if it's too dark, you're gonna, your base exposure, your shutter speed is gonna be like at say 1 second, right? So you need to be on a tripod. It's gonna be very difficult to handhold 1 second shutter speed with that base exposure. And if you want to make it a little brighter, you're gonna have to go to 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, right? Uh, to do the exposure compensation. So again, you still have to be very conscious of the shutter speed you're using, but you're controlling it through shutter speed rather than using the exposure compensation dial. So it's just a matter of workflow depending depending on what your priority is. Because typically you select shutter speed because you want to show motion, right? Or you want to freeze motion. So shutter speed is a little bit more of a pragmatic choice than it is creative. I get it. Slow showing motion in an image is a creative choice, but typically you want to choose the most common use for shutter speed is to freeze the action so you avoid camera shake. So you're going to choose shutter speed like 1/125th, 1/200th, 1/250th if you're going to be doing people shots, right? And with flash potentially, but generally for shooting people, right around 1/125th to 1/250th is a good shutter speed. Shooting your pets and kids, anything moving around, you want to be closer to 1/1000th of a second. Birds in flight, 1/2000th, 1/4000th. So my point is you're selecting shutter speed for a very specific purpose, and the aperture is irrelevant, right? You've selected that either wide open in most cases, so you can use the fastest shutter speed possible. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting to the crux of your question here. Uh, Using exposure compensation versus just controlling your shutter speed. It's just a very different. It just like I said, it really depends on what you want, what you're shooting, and what you want to shoot. Uh, I do not like to control exposure with the shutter speed. Typically, I will control the exposure using ISO, and if I want the image brighter, I'll use a higher ISO. If I want the image darker, I'll use a lower ISO. But I'm very specific usually when I choose my aperture and my shutter speed. I'm choosing my aperture specifically for the depth of field that I want, whether shallow or deep. I'm choosing my shutter speed specifically for what am I shooting and do I need to freeze the action? So if I want to show motion blur, so let's say I'm shooting a bird, if I want to show the wingtips moving, like blurry, but have the face sharp, it takes a little bit of technique, right, in panning. But generally, I'm going to use 1/1000th of a second, right? And that should show motion blur in the wings, but keep the face sharp. But if I want to freeze everything, I'm going to choose 1/2000th of a second. So again, I'm choosing shutter speed and aperture very specifically for something, and I'm adjusting brightness via ISO. And that is typically how most cameras auto ISO works, is they try to um, keep a minimum shutter speed for a certain light level, and then they will raise the ISO until you get to the brightness that you want. So if you're dialing exposure compensation, it's going to have a minimum shutter speed it's going to use, and then it's going to raise the ISO to maintain that shutter speed to minimize motion blur. Uh, And that's typically how most exposure compensation works with auto ISO. But for me, like when I'm doing birds in flight, I'm going to be in shutter priority. I'm going to not worry about the aperture because the aperture is going to be wide open. because my shutter speed is going to be 1/2000th, 1/4000th, and it's very rare it goes higher than f5.6. Normally, it's like at f4 at those shutter speeds, and the ISO goes wherever it needs to be to get the exposure that I want. And then if I dial in exposure compensation, plus or minus, the camera's going to adjust the ISO or the brightness using ISO when you're using exposure compensation. So it's rare that you would use shutter speed to control your exposure, right? And it's very unusual in my mind. It's more typical you control exposure via ISO, and then aperture and shutter speed are more deliberate. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm really bad at articulating things sometimes on the fly, like in a live stream, but that's the gist of it. Okay, Henry says fixed ISO. Okay, so yeah, if you're going to fix your ISO and fix your aperture, shutter speed would be basically exposure compensation at that point, right? Um, and there's really not much difference if you're using aperture priority, fixing the ISO, uh, and then and then using exposure compensation. It's just going to adjust the shutter speed for you. But again, yeah, if you're not using auto ISO, it's pretty much the same thing. Exposure compensation. The difference being is that you have to monitor your EV meter to know what shutter speed would be the base ISO before you start dialing in faster or slower shutter speeds. Um, versus being an aperture priority, you can use the exposure compensation dial and it'll automatically adjust the shutter speed to what it needs to be to give you that exposure. So I think it's better in your scenario, if you're going to fix the ISO, it's better if you just use the exposure compensation aperture priority. So you don't have to look at the EV meter to know what the camera thinks is the base exposure before you're making adjustments. I hope that makes sense. It's less work to do it in aperture priority with exposure compensation uh, than it is to use shutter speed, because then you have to look at the EV meter. And Gray Vanzini says, I quit using auto ISO a few months ago. Quite fun. Yeah. Like I said, you can do a lot of different things with a camera, right? Uh, I do that sometimes. Like when I want to pretend I'm shooting film, I'll fix the ISO like at ISO 400 and shoot in full manual otherwise, just like a film camera. I've done that before. And then Eric says, I've always used shutter speed to fix my exposure, learn something new, mainly because it's taboo to me to go above 200 ISO. Like I said, I don't worry about ISO. I let it go wherever it needs to be to give me the exposure I want. And I'm very deliberate about aperture and shutter speed. I have the OMD EM1 Mark III, and what I see live view histogram EVF is not what is the final image. Image is darker. I'm in ISO 100 to 400 lens, so no room to lower aperture. So higher, I'm not sure if that's a question or not, but uh, it's not in the final image. Image is darker. So the one thing you need to check for is to make sure you don't have live view turned on, right? Now, live view can be active in P, A, and S modes, program, aperture, and shutter mode. And then you have to select it to be active in manual mode as well. So if you're shooting in manual mode, um, what you see is what you get. Should be what you get on the EVF. You should be getting very similar exposure The other common thing is, the brightness that you set your monitor to or your EVF. Sometimes you have it set too bright. Maybe you need to darken it a little bit. And then the third thing is when you're dialing in exposure comp and you're dialing in more than uh, 3 stops in either direction, the live view cannot show you more than 3 stops difference on the screen itself. Another scenario where your images are going to be darker than what you see on your screen is when you're working in very low light situations. A lot of times the camera needs a certain amount of brightness to be able to autofocus, to use subject detection, all of these other things that are in the camera. It needs a certain amount of light to register on the sensor, or not on the sensor, but in the pipeline. There has to be a certain amount of light for the camera to work. So it's never going to darken the image to the point that, uh, unless it's pitch black. But generally, it's going to try to internally keep the brightness of the image at a certain level. So even when you're working in very low light conditions, the image that you see on the EVF is going to be brighter than the actual final image because the camera needs to maintain a certain luminance internally for certain features to work, like white balance, for example. How's it going to know white balance if there's no light, right? So if you're using auto white balance, your autofocus system needs a certain amount of light, particularly for subject detection. And I'm talking about internally in the camera, not how much light is hitting the sensor, but once a certain amount of light hits the sensor, is that enough internally to be bright enough? So it's going to raise the brightness internally. It's not going to be reflected on the final image, but it's going to raise the brightness internally so that these other features in the camera will work, like autofocus and white balance and well, those are the two come to mind. There's probably more. The metering system in general has to be able to work because it has to be able to see what's bright, what's dark in the image. And if everything is dark, it's not going to be able to meter the scene properly either. So that's why a lot of times when you're working in low light, the final image is going to be darker than what you see on your screen, is because what you're seeing on the screen is what the camera's seeing internally, but not what it's going to uh, actually capture to the final image. I hope that makes sense. Um, and hopefully, always do your due diligence. Double check everything I say because I'm just talking out of my butt here. I'm live, right? I'm not doing any due diligence here live, but I'm telling you what the way I understand electronics and the camera, and my experience with using the camera in low light situations, with using the live view boost. Live view boost is turned on or off, and using exposure comp beyond plus or minus 3 EV, these are all things that are going to affect directly uh, what you see on the back of the screen versus what the final image is going to be. In addition to that, the brightness of the monitor itself, right? So I typically have my monitors turned up a little bit brighter than the default value at 0. I do +2 or whatever that camera's index is. I typically have it a little brighter because I'm outdoors a lot and my eyes are dying. So if the screen is brighter, it's easier for me to read as well. Live view boost is off. I'm in shutter priority. Okay. Um, so yeah, I just elaborated on all the things I think that would be affecting what you see. I think being able to vary the ISO on the fly is the greatest improvement in camera technology has made since the film camera days. Yes. Um, yeah, because like I said, you choose aperture and shutter speed very deliberately. And ISO, just think of that as brightness. And this side towards screen says use a 90% set auto ISO 100 to 400. Use AI. See, the way this chat window is, part of this is blocked. Use AP 90%. Oh, so aperture priority 90% and set an auto ISO 100 to 400. And then higher says, that makes sense. I'm in low light. I usually don't use exposure comp more than a stop. I will check how I set up the screen brightness. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, so definitely low light, that is a problem. Um, I'm only familiar with the Olympus and omsystem cameras. I know that's how they behave in low light. I'm sure my other cameras do the same, but I don't use them enough to be able to tell you if that's the case on all cameras. Uh, but certainly the Olympus cameras. Now, functionally, it has to be the same, regardless of camera brand. There has to be a certain amount of light in the camera for all the features to work, right? And Great Zanzina says, yeah, I'm moving away from rangefinder type due to my right eye vision. Oh, OM system took me a while to set up completely. Yeah, it can take a while. I got to show you this text I sent my sister. Um, she has a Nikon D7100. While I look up this text, uh, she asked me what settings to use for. She wanted to take pictures of her dog running, and I had to give her all of these settings for her Nikon D7100. Mode dial to S, shutter dial to CH, push the AF button and rotate the front dial to change the number of focus points, push the AF button and rotate the rear dial to change the mode to AFC. Shutter speed 1/2000th of a second. Your AF area should be around 15 points. The AFC mode, definitely confirm you're in AFC for AF mode. Image quality, JPEG fine, image size large, JPEG compression, optimal quality, white balance, auto 1, picture control, NL, which is natural color profile, color space, sRGB, active delighting, auto, vignette control on, auto distortion control on, auto ISO sensitivity on, max sensitivity H1, minimum shutter speed, auto, +1 faster. Custom setting menu, AFC priority selection, focus, the lens 7200 f2.8 VR switch turned on. So I had to give her all of those instructions. I didn't get into the tracking sensitivity and all of these other settings that camera probably has. That was the simplest way I could explain to her how to take shots, the camera settings for her to get the best possible shots of her dog running. Uh, and when I tried it, so any camera system, my point being is any camera system can be pretty involved, right? When you get into the settings that you need for a specific scenario. Um, and when you're going from one camera system to another, like when I switch from my Sony to my Panasonic to my own system to my Nikon, it's hard. I'm constantly fumbling. Okay, where's the setting to do this? Where's the setting? And I sometimes I forget, and then the pictures don't come out right. Um, Anyhow, where's my chat window? And I saw Olympus. This side towards screen says, I saw Olympus OMD camera in the shop with lens for $200. I am check it out on Monday. I did not know the model number. It was small and had 3 dials. Could be anything, right? Maybe a pen camera. That makes sense. And the Great Vancini says, I kind of want the D7100 or something close to that. I'd go to the D7200 if you can. Uh, the significant improvement there is the buffer is better for continuous shooting, and the shadow area doesn't have any banding. people are having problem with banding on the D7100 in the shadows, and I certainly experienced that when I had mine. Nice vintage SLR look. It looks sweet. Hmm. It's probably an EM10 Mark One or an EM5 Mark One. Either one. Either way, it's a good deal for 200 bucks. If it's either one of those. But okay, everyone. Thanks for much for coming in. I'm going on almost 3 hours. Holy crap! But I have so much fun talking to everybody. It's really a pleasure, and I get a lot out of talking to you guys as well. Uh, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoy these streams, of course, you can always buy me a coffee. But hit the like button, all that stuff. Every YouTuber influencer says, right? But it does mean a lot to me. So thanks again for being here, and I'll be back on Tuesday with my shopping live stream where we're going to look for some more deals. I put up a few today, which you guys should probably definitely check out. Uh, robtrek.com/deals. There's some good deals on there today. So thanks again. We'll see you again soon.